The email hit my phone as I stood outside the operating room. Position terminated, effective immediately. No warning, no conversation, just a digital dismissal while the heart monitor beeped from the other side of the wall. My hands shook so badly I nearly dropped the phone. The new VP's signature glared up at me, smug and final. For 11 years, I built the very system that kept this company alive, line by line, code by code. He thought cutting me would make him look powerful. He didn't realize I'd built the lock he couldn't break. Before I continue my story, where are you watching from? Hit that like and subscribe button. You'll want to see how this ends. The email came at 10:42 a.m., right as the surgeon's assistant told me my father's heart had stopped beating on its own. My phone buzzed once, twice, then froze with a red notification across the top. Your position has been terminated effective immediately. The sender, Grant Mercer, the new vice president. His subject line read like a machine command: organizational restructure, no greeting, no empathy, just 3 sentences ending my 11 years with VentureAxis. I stared at the words until they blurred, the antiseptic air burning my nose as I tried to process what I was reading. My father was fighting for his life 2 doors away, and this man, this suit who'd been in the building for 6 weeks, had decided my performance no longer aligned with company objectives. I'd been the one to stay through every crash, every overnight patch, every failure that would have sunk us if I hadn't fixed it. I leaned against the cold wall, the hum of fluorescent lights mixing with the muffled beeps from inside the operating room. My hands shook so hard I almost dropped the phone, but I forced myself to reread it. Every sterile line of dismissal, every digit of my ID number erased from their system. I wasn't even worth a call, just deleted, replaced by a line item in Grant's PowerPoint. My throat tightened, rage clawing through the numbness. He thought he'd written me out of his story. What he didn't know was that I'd already written the system he was standing on. For 11 years, VentureAxis was my second home, the place where I left pieces of myself hidden behind every line of code, every sleepless night spent solving other people's problems. I was never loud about it, never the kind to chase credit or play politics. While executives pitched visions and buzzwords, I stayed behind the glass walls, translating chaos into order. When systems broke, they called me. When deadlines failed, they leaned on me. But when awards were handed out, I wasn't in the room. My work lived under someone else's signature. They called me dependable, steady, replaceable, the kind of praise that kills quietly. I built the synchronization framework that connected every product we owned. 11 years ago, it started as a weekend experiment, something to reduce processing lag between our servers. Over time, it became the bloodstream of the company, the unseen pulse moving every report, client feed, and performance metric. Everyone used it. No one understood it. They thought of it as background noise, the way people ignore the hum of electricity until the power cuts out. I never asked for a raise when promotions passed me by. I told myself loyalty meant something, that one day they'd notice who kept the walls from collapsing. Instead, they gave that recognition to whoever talked the loudest in meetings. I stayed, partly out of habit, partly because I believed stability mattered more than applause. My father used to say, "The quiet builders hold the world together." He was the reason I kept showing up, even when I started feeling invisible. Last winter, VentureAxis announced Project Aurora, a sleek name for what was really a desperate scramble to impress investors with an AI-integrated system upgrade. They wanted speed, and Grant Mercer wanted a name attached to the success. He arrived from New York with his manicured confidence and empty catchphrases: innovation through disruption, strategic realignment, lean integration. Behind the words, he didn't understand what made the company run. During our first meeting, he pointed at the network diagram I designed years ago and said, "This old skeleton's what's holding us back." I remember biting my tongue hard enough to taste iron. He dismissed months of prep work with a flick of his pen, replacing engineers with consultants who couldn't even spell our proprietary codebase. I warned him once, twice, then stopped. There's no point arguing with someone who mistakes arrogance for intelligence. I started backing up my files, quietly exporting archives no one else could interpret. Every evening, I logged 1 more hour, tidying the pieces only I understood. I had built this system to protect data integrity. I never thought I'd need it to protect myself. But the day Grant started deleting my teams and gutting the infrastructure, something inside me hardened. I realized loyalty had become a liability, and silence was just another way to be erased. That's when I remembered the clause buried deep in my old consulting contract, the one I'd written years ago to safeguard my early work, the one they'd never read carefully enough to understand. Grant Mercer moved fast, the kind of speed that looked impressive in investor briefings but left wreckage behind. Within his first month, he replaced department heads with consultants who parroted his slogans. He cut maintenance budgets, pushed deadlines closer, and promised the board that Project Aurora would revolutionize client delivery in under 90 days. 90 days. It had taken me 5 years to make the system stable enough to survive a single outage. Grant's smile never wavered as he stacked impossible goals into a glossy timeline. He wanted headlines, not infrastructure. He held meetings where he spoke in bullet points, where every warning was dismissed as negativity. "We need bold thinkers, not caretakers," he said once, pacing in front of a wall of screens showing simulated dashboards I knew were running fake data. He'd imported metrics from a demo server just to make them sparkle. Everyone nodded. No one corrected him. My replacement, a young analyst named Theo, approached me privately the week before my termination. "He wants us to migrate everything to the cloud environment next month," he whispered. "Without your key generator, it won't even compile." I shrugged, careful not to sound bitter. "Then he'll find out." Theo looked terrified. He was 23, still believed the company would protect him. I didn't have the heart to tell him otherwise. The next morning, Grant sent an all-staff email announcing the migration date. "Innovation requires courage," he wrote. "Legacy systems belong to legacy thinkers." That line hit me harder than I expected. Legacy systems. That's what I was now, part of the old scaffolding he couldn't wait to tear down. He started hosting press teasers, calling VentureAxis a model of agile transformation. Every photo showed him in front of my diagrams, claiming ownership of what he barely understood. The irony was that agility required stability, and stability was something my framework had provided without fail for a decade. 2 weeks before my firing, he invited me into a strategy sync. He didn't sit. He paced, phone in hand, talking more to his reflection in the glass than to me. "We're repackaging your integration module as Aurora Core," he said, tapping the conference table. "I need you to write me a technical summary, something the investors can digest. Keep it simple, something that makes it sound like innovation, not maintenance." It wasn't a request. It was an order. He wanted me to distill 10 years of architecture into a paragraph of buzzwords. I told him the truth. If you migrate the system without proper re-authentication, it'll lock out your entire client base. He laughed. "Then we'll unlock it. Don't be so dramatic, Stella. We're not saving lives here." That sentence stayed with me, the way cruelty hides behind casual tone. We weren't saving lives, but we were protecting data for hospitals, financial institutions, cities, systems people depended on. Grant didn't care. He wanted numbers, not consequences. After that meeting, I knew it was only a matter of time. He needed a scapegoat when things went wrong, and I was the perfect choice. Quiet, unassuming, too professional to make noise. When his restructuring memo arrived, it wasn't shock I felt. It was confirmation. Grant's arrogance wasn't a storm. It was a countdown. And like every countdown, it would end with something detonating right on schedule. That night, after leaving the hospital, I sat in my car under the garage lights, engine off, the glow from my laptop reflecting off the windshield. The silence was thick except for the faint mechanical click of cooling metal. My father was stable, the doctors said. That should have been enough to make me breathe easier. It didn't. Grant's email kept replaying in my mind like static. Words stripped of humanity, mechanical and final. Terminated effective immediately. 11 years of work gone with a keystroke. I opened my old consulting folder on the drive I'd kept hidden, the one they didn't know existed. It contained every iteration of the synchronization framework, from the first prototype to the final integrated model. At the very bottom was a file labeled LLC License Master. I clicked it open, and there it was, the clause I'd forgotten until that moment. During my early years, VentureAxis hadn't yet formalized intellectual property policies. To get paid for the original code, I'd incorporated a small consulting firm, Rhodes Logic LLC. The license agreement granted VentureAxis unlimited usage only while my contract with the company remained active. Termination for any reason, voluntary or not, voided all rights to use, modify, or distribute the software. In plain terms, the moment they fired me, every active synchronization key across the network became unlicensed. It wasn't malicious design. It was standard legal protection at the time. But now it sat like a fuse, waiting for ignition. I reread the language twice, every phrase hitting differently now. All runtime environments accessing proprietary encryption under this license shall deactivate upon termination of contract holder. The deactivation was built into the system's heartbeat, an automated signal that refreshed license validity every 72 hours. 3 days. In 3 days, VentureAxis's entire network would begin timing out, one server after another, unless a new license was authenticated by the owner, me. I closed the laptop, heart pounding with a mix of disbelief and dread. I hadn't built this for revenge. I had built it for protection, back when I was just a contractor trying to keep my code from being stolen. Now it was the very mechanism that would expose Grant's ignorance. They'd fired me without transition, without notice, without even asking what systems I controlled. I drove home, the city lights streaking across my windshield like sparks trailing behind a fuse. That night, I barely slept. My mind replayed the moment Grant dismissed me, his smug voice echoing, "We'll unlock it." He had no idea what he'd done. The next morning, I called my attorney, the one who had helped me draft that original contract. "If the license expires," I asked carefully, "and the company attempts to continue using the system, what are the implications?" He didn't hesitate. "Unauthorized use of proprietary software, automatic breach. You'd have grounds for injunction and damages." "Even if I didn't trigger anything?" "You don't have to. The clause enforces itself." I ended the call and sat quietly, fingers pressed against my temples. 3 days wasn't much time, but it was enough. I spent the next 48 hours in silence, backing up personal records, clearing access logs, preparing for the inevitable cascade. On the third night, at 11:59 p.m., the heartbeat would stop checking in. The system wouldn't crash immediately. It would falter, stutter, then freeze in slow motion. Grant would call it a glitch. The engineers would scramble, reboot, panic. And when the lights went out on their demo day, they'd realize the same thing I did at that hospital. Some systems only fail when arrogance cuts their lifeline. I closed my laptop with a quiet finality, the same calm that comes after a storm passes. 3 days, I whispered to myself. 3 days until the silence starts speaking. By the morning of the investor demo, VentureAxis's headquarters buzzed like a hornet's nest. The lobby screens pulsed with Grant Mercer's new branding, sleek silver letters flashing, "Project Aurora, the future of integration." Employees rushed past carrying tablets, cables, and coffee cups, pretending not to notice the tension humming beneath the surface. I wasn't supposed to be there, but I walked in anyway. Badge deactivated. A guest pass clipped to my jacket. No one stopped me. They were too busy trying to keep the show running. From the 32nd floor, I could already feel the panic bleeding through the glass walls. The conference room was full, executives, investors, journalists, all waiting for the grand reveal. Grant stood at the front, immaculate as always, his perfect tie centered, his confidence loud enough to drown out the growing unease. "Today," he said, pacing in front of a giant digital dashboard, "we show the world how innovation outpaces hesitation." Applause rippled, thin and forced. I leaned against the doorway, unseen. He clicked the remote, and the screens came alive with shimmering graphs and real-time client feeds, or what should have been real-time. For a moment, everything looked flawless. Then, one by one, the graphs froze. The colors dulled, the animations stuttered, and error codes began stacking like falling dominoes. The room went quiet. Someone whispered, "Is that supposed to happen?" Grant frowned, tapping the remote. "Minor glitch," he said. "They'll fix it in the back end." But the back end wasn't responding. The servers weren't authenticating. Every live system had just failed to renew its license. Within minutes, call notifications began lighting up his phone, client dashboards offline, data syncing errors, frozen transactions. The lead investor leaned forward. "Grant, what's happening?" "It's a temporary outage," he stammered. "Our system's reinitializing." His voice cracked on the word reinitializing. "That's when." I stepped forward. "It's not temporary." Every head turned. Grant's expression shifted from disbelief to fury. "What are you doing here?" I walked to the table, calm, deliberate, setting my laptop down. "Watching," I said softly, "and making sure the right person answers that question." The lead investor frowned. "Who are you?" "Stella Rhodes," I said, "former senior systems architect, creator of the integration framework you're currently watching fail." A ripple of murmurs spread across the room. Grant laughed, forced and shaky. "This is absurd. Security—" "Before you call anyone," I interrupted, opening my laptop, "you should see this." I projected a document onto the main screen, the original license agreement from Rhodes Logic LLC. My name at the top. VentureAxis as the licensee. The expiration clause highlighted in yellow. "According to this contract," I said evenly, "the license to operate my proprietary encryption framework expired 72 hours after my termination, which means, as of midnight last night, every module depending on that framework has reverted to inactive status, including your demo servers, your live dashboards, and every client interface currently calling home to this building." Silence settled like frost. The lead investor's jaw tightened. "Grant, is this true?" He sputtered, looking for words that didn't exist. "She's bluffing. This shouldn't. It's already happening," I said. "You fired me without reviewing the license terms. You used proprietary software you no longer had rights to. You ignored every warning. You called me a legacy thinker. Congratulations. You just inherited a legacy problem." The investor turned cold eyes on Grant. "You said this system was fully owned by VentureAxis." "It was!" Grant's voice broke, desperation creeping in. "She's exaggerating. We can fix this." "You can't," I said. "You need a new license key, which only I can issue. Otherwise, every client using your platform will lose real-time access within the next hour." The screens behind him flickered red as the servers failed one by one. The hum of the room turned into a chorus of panic. Someone from IT burst in, whispering frantically into Grant's ear. His face drained of color. The investor stood. "We're done here." Grant lunged toward me, his composure gone. "You planned this." "No," I said, meeting his eyes. "You did. I just wrote the system." He froze, the realization dawning too late. I closed my laptop, the sound sharp in the heavy silence. "You can reach me through legal counsel if you want to renegotiate the license. Market rate has gone up." I turned to leave, but the lead investor stopped me. "Miss Rhodes," he said, voice careful, "what would it take to restore operations?" "Fair contracts," I replied. "Fair leadership." I didn't look back as I walked out. Behind me, the shouting started. The board demanding explanations, Grant trying to salvage a career already burning. By the time the elevator reached the ground floor, I could hear the alarms of a system dying on the floors above. Every beep a reminder that arrogance always deletes itself. By sunset, the story had already escaped the building. Tech blogs were calling it the demo day disaster. Screenshots of the frozen dashboards leaked online within hours, followed by a memo confirming that VentureAxis had suspended operations pending internal review. Translation: chaos. Grant Mercer's name trended by nightfall, first as a punchline, then as a cautionary tale. I watched from my apartment, the city lights flickering through the blinds while the news anchor explained how a licensing oversight cost one of the country's top analytics firms millions. I didn't feel triumphant, just quiet. The kind of quiet that comes after noise finally collapses. My father was home from the hospital, recovering, asking questions I couldn't fully answer. "You didn't do anything illegal, did you?" he asked softly. I shook my head. "No, Dad. I just stopped fixing their mistakes." The phone rang constantly. Reporters, lawyers, former co-workers pretending to be concerned. I ignored most of them. One message came from Theo, the young analyst. "They're blaming you," he whispered. "Grant says you sabotaged the migration." I almost laughed. If they think firing the architect mid-renovation isn't sabotage, that's their problem. He sighed. "They're trying to find your backups." "They won't," I said. "And even if they did, they wouldn't know how to make it breathe." For the first time in years, I felt weightless. VentureAxis's board met that week without Grant. By Friday, they announced his termination for gross negligence and misrepresentation of technical ownership, a sterile phrase for public disgrace. I knew they'd rebuild eventually, hire consultants, redesign systems, find new buzzwords, but they'd never rebuild trust. As for me, I didn't want revenge money or settlements. I wanted distance, space to think about what came next. A week later, I walked into a co-working space downtown with a new laptop, a new domain, and a name that had followed me since those forgotten nights of building alone. Rhodes Logic. No suits, no slogans, no noise. Just code, clean and deliberate. I started taking small contracts, companies too small for VentureAxis to notice, too human to exploit. Each project carried a quiet satisfaction, not destruction but reclamation. By the time VentureAxis released its official apology, I had already registered 3 new clients and 1 investor who believed in ethical tech. Grant vanished from headlines, replaced by another executive scandal. I didn't need to see his fall to know how it ended. The world had already moved on, and so had I. 6 months later, the world had stopped talking about VentureAxis, but Rhodes Logic was everywhere. The name appeared quietly on client testimonials, on software updates that worked without failure, on contracts written in plain English instead of corporate riddles. I built it differently from the start. No investors, no inflated titles, just a small team of people who'd been cast aside by the same system that once erased me. The oldest was 58, laid off 2 weeks before his pension vested. The youngest was a mother of 3 who'd been told she was too distracted for leadership. We worked like survivors, not employees. Every project carried purpose, transparency, fairness, control. Sometimes I'd wake before dawn, open the window, and hear the hum of servers running across the city. My code, my structure, still alive, now answering to no one but itself. My father visited the office once, walking slowly through the rows of desks, reading the plaque by the entrance. Built by those they underestimated. He smiled, eyes shining. "You turned a firing into a foundation," he said. "That's better than revenge." He was right. I didn't destroy VentureAxis. I outgrew it. The clause that once protected my code had become a metaphor for everything else: boundaries, ownership, self-respect. Grant Mercer had mistaken silence for submission, but silence was just strategy. When his kind spoke of power, they meant control. When I spoke of it now, I meant creation, the ability to build something that couldn't be taken, only shared. One afternoon, a message appeared in my inbox from an unfamiliar address. "For what it's worth," it read, "I finally understand what you built. I wish I had listened." It wasn't signed, but I knew the tone. I didn't reply. Some stories don't need epilogues. Instead, I closed my laptop, turned to my team, and said, "Let's make something impossible to ignore." The room filled with the sound of quiet confidence, keys clicking, ideas forming. That was the real ending, not a headline or collapse, but freedom. They thought firing me would erase my worth. Instead, it forced me to prove where it truly lived. In the end, revenge wasn't destruction at all. It was redirection towards something I owned completely. What surprised me most wasn't the firing or the public fallout. It was how calm I felt after losing everything I thought defined me. That silence, the one that follows humiliation, is where I finally heard the truth. I had built my own safety long before anyone tried to take it away. Every log I saved, every clause I wrote, every email I documented seemed obsessive at the time. Now I see it for what it was: quiet strength disguised as over-preparation. People think revenge is a single act, a dramatic comeback. It isn't. It's the slow, deliberate patience of someone who refuses to panic when the world decides they're disposable. I used to envy loud leaders, the ones who filled every room with certainty. But I learned something they never will. Real power doesn't shout. It watches, records, remembers, and waits for the moment arrogance forgets to double-check. When they cut me loose, I didn't need to fight. I just stopped protecting them from their own ignorance. That's what quiet power really is, the ability to let the truth reveal itself. It took years for me to see how much that hidden discipline had cost me. The late nights, the missed dinners, the patience I mistook for passivity. But I'd do it again, because the same habits that made me invisible also made me unbreakable. If you've ever been underestimated, don't rush to prove your worth in someone else's spotlight. Build the systems, the paper trails, the small defenses that no one can erase. When they finally forget to thank you, they'll also forget how deeply they depend on you. And that's when the balance shifts quietly in your favor. How to get started today. Document everything, even the things that seem unimportant. They matter later. Keep private backups of your work and agreements. Never rely on company memory. Learn your contracts. One buried clause can be your lifeline. Stay calm when others play loud. Silence unsettles arrogance. Protect your integrity like property. It's the only thing you truly own. Have you ever realized your quiet preparation was the reason someone couldn't break you? Tell me what that moment looked like for you.